You guys all ready to jump in?
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Always.
Yes, everyone can join now. Go ahead. Sweet. All right. So I wanted to put this together. This conference has a lot of amazing people and speakers. Among them are some of you guys. And, a lot of this stuff, the conversations in Bitcoin center around, economics or technical discussions and this kind of stuff. And that's all great. And I know we're all super interested in that kind of stuff too. But, my feeling is that ultimately this is a revolution in human behavior and interaction. And Bitcoin is just something that inspires different behaviors or permits or prohibits different behaviors. And so I know from having talked to all of you that a part of this journey has not only been understanding how Bitcoin works and engaging in it and building it, but also in kind of feeling how it's inspired change within you. And so I think what I wanted to do with this panel is just explore that concept, look at how it's changed different components of our individual personal lives, and then maybe even look ahead to how we think that process may continue into the future. So what I wanted to do to get this started, and this may seem like an odd start, but I'm going to go around to each of you. And I just would like you to, in your own words, obviously, try to describe the person you were before you knew anything about Bitcoin. And so, Knut, why don't we start with you? Like, how would you characterize yourself before coming to know and understand and engage with Bitcoin?
The first word that comes to mind is that I was probably a seeker of some kind, seeking truth in stuff, and finding very little of it in money. Like being curious about how the world worked and what made the cogs turn and what made economies tick. And before Bitcoin, I mean, Bitcoin for me coincided with a lot of other stuff in my life, like starting a family and getting a proper land job instead of sailing around the world on a tall ship and doing fuck all with my life. So, I guess I was and still is a philosopher at heart, and I was longing for something to like that Queens of the Stone Age lyric, give me something good to die for, to make it beautiful to live. I was looking for something like that, and I think I found it.
Gigi?
Oh man, where do I even begin? Like, you guys have no idea what kind of crazy person I was before I entered Bitcoin. I was pretty much skating all day, every day, drinking myself to death, being very nihilistic. What else? I was a vegetarian as well. That changed. So this might sound crazy to some people that haven't been in the Bitcoin space for quite a while, but basically my time preference was very, very high, and now it's very, very low. And if you understand that sentence, then you might also be able to understand what changed for me. So I look at it that way, that you will have to do a lot of work to actually understand Bitcoin. And unless you're already primed in some way, putting in the amount of hours that's necessary to understand that beast will obviously change you. And it changed me quite a bit. That's also why in my book, it's actually the first lesson that Bitcoin will change you more than you will change it. And that's definitely true for me, because I wasn't primed for Bitcoin at all, except for having a technology background. But it changed my worldview drastically, and my view of politics also drastically, and of so many other things, also education and how the world works, and in terms of personal responsibility, in terms of fitness. There are so many things, like it's impossible to answer that very briefly.
Yeah,
but
I
changed a lot.
We'll get into each one of those in detail for sure. Nick, how about you? What were you like before you came to be involved in Bitcoin?
Really young and stupid. I was in high school, and I never thought for myself. I always like thought, and agreed with whatever anybody else thought. Like I remember taking gov in my senior year and just agreeing with everyone just cuz like I didn't want to, disagree with them and think for myself. I didn't really have like a life plan. Like there was nothing I was really interested in other than sports. And yeah, it definitely kicked me in the ass, got my life on track, and yeah, it really made me feel passionate. It made me passionate about learning. Like in high school, I never gave a shit about learning. Like I always just did schoolwork just to do it. And now like I learn in my free time because it's just something I enjoy, and that really helped me in a big way.
Hey, Katie.
Hi, gentlemen.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. So we're just going around the room. Basically, I did a little introduction about what this is all about. And we're trying to explore the different ways that Bitcoin has influenced us on a personal and individual basis. And the first question is just, what kind of a person were you before Bitcoin? So Connor's up next. I'll let him take the floor.
I think for me, I can kind of bracket it into like on a my perspective from a macro way of thinking about things and like a micro way. So from a macro perspective, I think that Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1 kind of gives a good framework for thinking about your view towards the future. And mine was on a macro scale, sort of like indefinitely pessimistic. I was feeling like things weren't headed in a good direction, but it was sort of like, I don't know exactly what the problems are going to be. I just feel like generally society lacks a sort of vibrance, that our leaders don't have any, moral standing, that there doesn't seem to be people in positions of power that are competent. And I think things are going to get worse, but I don't know exactly how. And it'll just be like kind of a slow decay. But I think that Bitcoin was like just in a matter of weeks, I went complete 180 to a definite optimist that the world is going to get better, and I know how it will get better. And that changes you in a lot of different ways. So I think that macro outlook then changed me on a micro level of like, what are the things that I'm oriented towards? What are the things I'm spending my time on? And outside of just like binging Bitcoin and being super excited that there actually is a political path that is workable and is not some sort of hopeless, like, let me just protest for protest's sake, which is very self-referential and sort of like, it doesn't really, it makes you feel good, but does it really accomplish anything? It seems sort of like intellectual masturbation. But once I sort of saw this is a definite path forward that I think has an actual strong chance of changing the world, then I changed my own interest to think of things on broader time horizons, I guess. So like my passions prior to finding Bitcoin is like fashion and the latest trends in hip hop and stuff like that, which is, extremely short time focused. And it's constantly like, what is the latest trend? What is the newest thing on Instagram or something like that, where, something, it changes day by day. Whereas once I had an optimistic view towards the future, then suddenly I was like, I need to, work on my health, work on my diet, just learn more generally. Like I got a really strong like itch to learn about history and kind of like find or to place myself within this historical moment, because once I really felt like there is a path to change in the world to make it better, I was like, well, I feel like I need to understand other crucial turning points in history so I can put myself in one of them and understand contextually how things map out. And so I feel like it just did a complete 180 on my view towards the world, my own mental well-being and feeling better about things, how I interact with other people, and how I think about relationships on longer time horizons. So, I mean, it's influenced every part of my life, but I think those are sort of the big breakdowns of it.
Nice. Katie, how about you?
So I've actually started to change a little bit before I learned about Bitcoin. I mentioned it before that all my experiences in life as I'm coming from Russia kind of lead me through understanding the value of Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. So I realized that just 2 weeks before the previous halving, I immigrated from Russia to the United States. I barely spoke any English, but I knew that something was wrong. Back in Russia, I was learning economics. It was my major, and I totally rage quit my university after having crazy experiences like having my national currency devalued like 2x compared to US dollar. And I was like, something is not okay. And I was looking for like a cheat code or some shortcut to a good life. And I was like, all right, I'm going to immigrate to the States and look for it there. And it kind of forced me to learn English. And it probably was my shortcut to Bitcoin as well. But yeah, since then, all my experiences were just confirming that there is a better system, and I just need to search for it and learn it. And then I found Bitcoin.
Nice. And Max, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I will keep off the camera just to save on
Sure.
bandwidth. But yes, I'm still here. So I would say before Bitcoin, I was, let's say, a theoretical anarchist. I understood the theory, and I've done my fair share of reading of Austrian economics and individualistic philosophy. But a lot of my actions did not align with what I understood to be true. And that was really ripping me apart and made me quite hopeless because there was no seeming way for me to live my individualistic lifestyle in this realm and in this world that was so fucked up and so full of coercion in every single level. And Bitcoin changed that quite drastically because it kicked me down specifically the cypherpunk rabbit hole. And of course, that starts with Bitcoin having control over your own currency, but also having control over your information and your privacy. And this was something. Oh, wait, Connor says I cannot hear. He cannot hear me. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Max.
Apparently, yes.
I can.
Okay, good. So yes, that was basically the change. You know, Bitcoin is pure Austrian theory and individualistic philosophy, but it is applied. Right? It is actually happening. You can actually use it as a tool every single day in your life. So this is something that personally was very liberating for me on how it changed from let's say being pessimistic and hopeless and not really knowing how to live the life that I want to live. To actually having this tool available to express myself fully.
Yeah. And so, there was a lot of different angles there. And, in this conversation, if you have something to contribute, you want to take it a certain way, just, chime up and say so. But my experience had, similarities with all of yours. And I think like many of us, I looked out on the world and, I'd always been curious and interested in history, wanting a better world and, of course, a life for myself, and looking out and not seeing a path toward it changing in a positive way, like not seeing how that would be possible in a sustained way. And, among other things, one of the first ones I kind of want to delve into a little bit is just the impact on mental health and general sense of well-being. So from my perspective, I've always been someone who values my health and who attempts to be happy and fulfilled and find meaning in the things that I'm doing and the people I'm interacting with. But when you're kind of in a broader context of something that you think is, going in the wrong direction, then that can have a big influence on how you feel when you wake up effectively. And so I'm just wondering, and since being involved in Bitcoin, Connor, as you were saying, that's changed dramatically for me because I see now a means of turning things around. And so, that's had a material impact on me day to day to know that I can wake up and engage in something that has the potential to have that level of positive impact, both on the broader world and on my individual life. So I'm wondering if any of you guys have, anything to add on to kind of how it's impacted your sense of well-being and mental health and happiness.
For me, like when I graduated high school and I had to make, a whole new set of friends because all my other friends went away for college, I was like, okay, I'm going to surround myself with people, who are like-minded, who push each other and want to like help each other succeed. and I've done that, and I definitely do think that that's helped, my mental state a lot, because they're helping me towards my goals and, to what I want to succeed. I feel like a lot of people might hang around the wrong crowd of people, and I do think that can really, negatively, uh, negatively impact your mood, your mental well-being, and all of that. There's a lot that goes into it, but yeah.
Yeah, for me personally, as I was saying, I was quite nihilistic and pessimistic about the state of the world. I think that's something you hear all the time when you talk to Bitcoiners and how that changed. And I'm a huge internet nerd, and I study quite a bit of internet history and stuff like that. And I'm a huge fan of Aaron Swartz and what he did. And he had a quote. He was saying that you literally should ask yourself every day, what is the most important thing you could be working on right now? And if you're not working on that, why aren't you? And I had this quote stuck in my mind before I discovered Bitcoin even. And I always thought I would go into open source contributions and work on Linux or stuff like that. And once I discovered Bitcoin, this question became obvious for me. And literally every day I wake up, ask myself this question, and the answer is always Bitcoin. So I just work on Bitcoin all day, every day. And it's a very motivating and positive thing that's happened to me. I really believe that, Bitcoin can change the world for the better, and can also change individuals for the better, because I experienced it myself, and I had so many conversations with other Bitcoiners that experienced the same thing. And I think it boils down to Bitcoin changing your time preference. And I think it's also that the freedoms that are granted by Bitcoin, they come at the price of personal responsibility. So you kind of have to take a lot of personal responsibility upon yourself. And that changes you in a positive way, I would say.
Yeah, and it ties into skin in the game.
Gigi, and I would... Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I can totally agree with Gigi that it helps you focus so much. No matter what you do, if it helps you focus in general, whether you're doing Bitcoin stuff or other stuff. And I think it ties into skin in the game. One of my favorite quotes is from John Cleese when he talks about his childhood and the town where he grew up, where it seemed like everyone in that town wanted to get into their coffins as quickly and as comfortably as possible without ever having been seriously embarrassed. And so if you don't put anything on the line and throw yourself out there and try to do something, you'll never excel at anything or get anywhere in life. And so Bitcoin really helped me be less scared of my own thoughts and my own opinions, and it helped me realize that I can be an individualist and not be ashamed of it, but rather embrace it. And there is a community out there somewhere, and there are like-minded people, and you just have to find them.
Knut, do you mind if I ask, have you dug into why you think it's had that kind of impact? I know you mentioned skin in the game, but just in terms of being able to express yourself with greater confidence perhaps than previously, what is it about this thing that you think allowed you to do that?
I think it ties into another favorite quote. I don't remember who said it, but if you're a libertarian and not into Bitcoin, what are you doing with your life? It's a waste of time, because this rather than when it clicked for me is that when I realized and this is, by the way, it's a continuing process. It keeps on clicking for me new things about this, and but the thing that instead of focusing on how to change the world as it is, try to change the world for yourself and from your own perspective. And this is the ultimate tool for that, because everyone can use it for that. So it is it is a thing for the masses, but it's a one-man revolution for every man, woman, and child on Earth. I mean, you can literally take matters into your own hands, and I think that is a very powerful tool. And I mean, does that answer the question? I don't really know, but something along those lines.
Sure. Max?
Just to pick up on what was said previously, I think, as mentioned now, we had the goals already in mind, right? This was something that we had figured out before getting into Bitcoin. And, praxeology is the study of human action in the sense that humans have ends that they want to achieve, right? Goals, basically. And they utilize means in order to reach those ends. And means are tools, technologies, strategies. And when we have an end in mind, but we don't have the available tools in order to reach that, then this is quite a devastating experience, right? If we find that meaning in life in achieving these ends according to the means available, and to create the means as we need them, so that we can fulfill these ends, then Bitcoin fits right in, right? It is a perfect tool. It is fucking incredible. And when using this tool, we can actually achieve this individualistic libertarian dream, in a sense, and nobody can fuck with it. And this is phenomenal. And all of a sudden, you have the tool available to live that fulfilling and happy life that you want to.
Yeah, the purpose of all tools, by the way, time. And since Bitcoin basically is time, because time is money, right? So this is like the ultimate tool for everything, because it saves you time like nothing else in the long run, at least.
Yeah. And I'd like to go back to something that Gigi was talking about, because I'm fascinated with the concept of how our perception of the degree of freedom that we have access to influences our behavior, and in particular, our relationship or our perspective on personal responsibility, i.e. taking responsibility for more things and not delegating responsibility or developing a dependence on other people or things. So anybody in the group kind of have anything to say about what, kind of their perception of the freedom that Bitcoin provides has impacted them in that way?
Yeah, I would love to comment on it. So in the world with no freedom, we have absolutely no responsibility. So it is like lack of training, right? So this muscle that makes you strong, it just weakens over time because you're being taken care of on every step of your life. You get on a plane and they're like, safety first, just fasten your belt. And you never read the paper that they give you, how to exit the plane in times of emergency. And you just know that they will take care of you. So once you get this freedom that, oh geez, now I hold my own kiss, I have so much responsibility, and you start applying this, do your own research and be your own everything into every aspect of your life, and you realize that now you do way better research. You start into taking care of not only of yourself, but you also consider attack factors like what if the person that drives next to you actually fucks up. So you're seeing the picture better. You're actually being responsible not for yourself, but for stupidity of others as well, for consider attack factors. And I feel like after I took this responsibility for my kids, which was a big step for me when I got into that, I realized that I take better care of myself and my responsibility in every aspect of my life, pretty much.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I got into Bitcoin, I was 18, and I ended up moving out of my parents' house when I was 19, and it's really taught me a lot about responsibility, especially, saving my money. It's like if I'm going to live on my own, I'm going to need to afford rent. I'm going to need to afford food. I'm not going to. When I was younger, one summer I worked a whole summer, saved up like $500 mowing lawns, and I spent it all on an Xbox. Like, do you know how stupid that is? Like, it's being in Bitcoin has taught me not to spend money on stupid stuff and to actually save it for the future and for stuff I actually need to like survive and take good care of myself. Because even when it comes to like food, I would love to eat like Chick-fil-A every day, but it's not the best thing for you. So it's like I need, money for vegetables and fruits and like good healthy stuff.
Vegetables?
I wanna go back to the confidence point that we were talking about earlier, which is I think that a lot of the confidence comes from just talking to normies and just realizing like how far behind they are. Like so many of these very important concepts, like money, is just like you begin to like Bitcoin gives you basically the ability to like peel back the onion and be like, all right, everyone's conception of money is just it's a shared illusion. That's as far as they go. Like they haven't thought about this more than like a 15-second soundbite, and then they just go on to the next thing. And a lot of political ideology or economic thinking boils down to these like super simple just memes that people just like repeat to themselves that don't actually have much insight, but they're very nice sound bites. And so I think Bitcoin is like, it gives you this like matrix vision where you can like see things that are like beneath what's actually happening. And then you're just like, oh my God, like no one has any idea what's going on. And so I think for me, it gives me a lot more confidence to just like enter into conversations and just like, be kind of that Socratic voice. It's just like, all right, but let's go a little bit further. Is it really just a shared illusion? Is it just an accident? We happen to settle on things that have the best monetary properties? No, of course not. But I think so stemming from that, it made me just like cut out a lot of conversations in my life because I was just like, why am I even talking to these people? Like they're just NPCs at this point repeating the same thing. And so I could save a lot of time and energy and like continually invest in myself by just, listening to a podcast and walking around instead of just having more circular conversations with people who say the same things over and over. So I think that was huge and freed up so much time in my life that I could then go and, constantly reinvest. And I feel like I've branched out into so many different areas of interest that I hadn't even thought about, like architecture and urban planning. And I mean, I already talked about history, but I mean, and then with each of those, you can go deeper and deeper. And they're all so interrelated. Also, I think that's another thing that gives you a ton of confidence is being like, once you go deep enough down the rabbit hole, you realize everything is tied together and not in like a conspiracy theory, like everything is like plotted out together, but like really, I mean, changing the way that we perform economic calculation and distorting that obviously is going to have ripple effects through every single aspect of human action and culture. And tying those links together is such a powerful insight that just red pills you so hard that you can't be wrong in a way. Like you can't look at what's happening with our monetary system and believe any other thing is causing these major disruptions in societies and have been seeing the same pattern, for civilization after civilization. So I think all of that kind of like builds into this massive burst of optimism and confidence in me personally.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that, and I think it's partially because, as you said, Connor, money is such a foundational thing in terms of how we act and interact. But it's so fascinating that, establishing clarity in that one domain then bleeds out into, presumably we can't objectively say we see everything clearly, but a pretty strong sense that we're seeing things more objectively and clearly than we were before in many different domains, as you were saying. I mean, it's kind of bizarre. I mean, I take your point as to why that process may be unfolding, but has anybody else experienced that or have any stories around that?
I have something to add in terms of like having confidence in something. I think it's also for many Bitcoiners a new kind of reality opens up once you realize that this thing will probably very, very probably stick around. And every Satoshi I save today will serve me in the future, and I can be quite sure of that. Like if that's not the case, then we all need something else to do and find a new hobby and find new jobs. But like given that Bitcoin won't suffer any catastrophic failures in the next couple of decades, Bitcoin is like a rock to rest upon. And that's very different from everything else in the world. Like, even if you invest in real estate or something else, like I have so many friends now, they have kids, they start families, they build houses and so on. And they take out huge loans to pay back their houses because they want to have something for their family. And I can sympathize with that line of thought. But as we've seen, there are so many external factors that will lead to your house not being your house anymore. But my Bitcoin will always be my Bitcoin. You know, there's no way around that. And I think that just gives a lot of confidence as well. You know, like if you happen to have a little Bitcoin nest egg, then you can rely upon that. And you can also rely upon Bitcoin being there and just being interesting and doing its thing and more or less providing for you and others. And I think that's a very nice thing to have happened in this world, because with the instability of the financial system and all the bubbles around the world that are happening and just popping all over the place, it's very nice to have very deep stability in Bitcoin.
What do you guys think of this thought? So I think, at least in my perspective, what Bitcoin represents is a future with a lot more possibility and potential than there was previous to Bitcoin. So I see a world, in which Bitcoin exists as being far more expansive, far more potential, far more possibility, far more innovative, far more prosperous, peaceful, etc. And I wonder, or I think this is, I feel pretty strongly about this, that one of the I think we could characterize a lot of these changes we've been discussing as each of us as individuals trying to become more fit for purpose almost. We're changing how we spend our time, who we interact with, what our diet is, our approach to health, our intellectual pursuits, all of this kind of stuff to try to become seemingly more fit, all around. And I wonder, like, why is that? And I think my perspective is, now that this greater world of possibility and potential has opened up, I think that's just inspiring us to turn ourselves into people that are more able to capitalize on that new world of potential. How do you guys, do you guys agree? And how do you guys feel about that?
I agree. Me and the Zoomers always talk about how like a Bitcoin standard would bring on like a new industrial revolution. Like, a lot of people are gonna get their debt sorted out. They're gonna get their lives sorted out. This whole age of like spending thousands of dollars on like a Gucci sweatshirt's gonna stop. People are gonna stop buying all this fiat, stuff, and they're gonna want to save their money and invest their money in better things. It's gonna cause people to better themselves, which betters society. I mean, like, all of us, like we just said, have bettered ourselves immensely from this magic internet money, and it's like, what's gonna happen when the whole world goes on it,
There's a more negative side to this as well. You could have quite a dystopian view, because there are enemies that are not to be underestimated, like the mobsters that run the world, and like getting fit and getting fit for the fight against them could be just a survival thing. Because there might be some really rough times ahead. We don't know that with the COVID crisis and everything. So I think like the red pill metaphor is very telling, because waking up and seeing the world for what it really is can be very depressing. And I think many of us just buckle up for the hard times ahead, and that's why we try to do something with our lives. Of course, that's a positive thing, but there's some fright in there as well. Like, I think we're scared of the future if we don't do this? What would happen to us if we didn't?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I always like to say that we're still living in peacetime, like in the Bitcoin land. I mean, there were some tiny wars and disagreements, and we had our shitcoin phase and so on. But when it comes down to it, I think we're still living in peacetime, and who knows what's going to happen in the future? Maybe it will be very rough and very warlike, and maybe it will be just like step change after step change and a gradual transition. Who knows? But in terms of personal development and how individuals change, I think it all, in essence, again, it boils down to having a lower time preference. And I think it's obvious that Bitcoin lowers your time preference, and everything I think follows from that. And I think what's also interesting is that I see many Bitcoiners change their attitude and wanting to really build something and do something of value, like create something that lasts. It doesn't matter if it's code or content or whatever. But I realized as well, no matter what, like what's going to happen to Bitcoin or whatever comes, may it be wartime or peacetime or whatever, as long as you do your best to provide value, other people are going to value that. And I think that's the best way forward and the best way through any time, the good times and the bad times. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners think along the same ways. They want to be useful. They want to provide value and contribute in whatever way possible.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about this a lot, and there is an aspect of what I do and what I feel motivated to do. It's like, I've got to be ready. Like when things go down, like whatever's going to happen, we know there's going to be some sort of major change. And I have to be, like fit, but also like mentally like in shape in order to deal with what sort of reckoning is going to happen. And also like, it's so exciting to be a part of such a major shift that I want to be ready for it so that I can contribute to it. In the same way, like I see so many parallels with the American Revolution, right? And you had all these amazing Renaissance men, the Jeffersonian ideal, the John Adams, and they just like spent so much time just studying so many different parts of history and different political systems and different ideas, political philosophies, and all that came together in this sort of like constitutional convention and gave them enough conviction they were willing to fight a war for it. And then in winning the war, they didn't just squander it, right? Like they were able to truly build something much different and much better than what we'd seen before. And I think, we have the potential to iterate to the next level. Like we've learned so much in the past 200 years. What is this new, radical reorganization going to look like? And what, economic understandings or political understandings can we develop now so that we can, seed ourselves for when we're in the room and we're, ready to, start putting pen to paper and determining what these new relationships are going to look like. And so I feel myself like I'm, especially with COVID's happening, like things are happening way faster than I anticipated at all. And I don't want to be in that room and not feel like I'm competent. And so that's a lot of what goes into my thinking about being ready for whatever's going to happen.
Yeah, those are all good points, and it's something I've been thinking about lately in light of COVID and what's going on. But in that, there's a lot of discussion about human rights and how they're being infringed and which of them actually exist, etc. And it seems to me that you don't have rights. You have things which you can defend and things which you can't. And if you can defend them, then you get to experience them. And if you can't, then they can be taken away from you by someone who can overcome your defenses. And I think that's a great point in that an aspect of what this inspires in terms of behavior change is in forcing you to consider, counter to your point, how well you can defend or repel these different, attack vectors or potential threats or potential scenarios that will unfold in the future. And I think that's a big part of a lot of the change it inspires, because you're looking out at your world and at your life and saying, well, this is a vulnerability, this is a vulnerability, this is a vulnerability. how do I shore them up so that they're less of a vulnerability. I can defend them more capably. And I think, that's obviously one of the big positive attributes of Bitcoin is that it's a way to store your wealth that is far easier to defend than anything that preceded it, because of its digital nature and the way in which you're able to to store it. But I think that's a good point. So maybe it's more appropriate to say these changes that we're seeing in ourselves that are being inspired by interacting with Bitcoin are both trying to put ourselves in the best position possible to capitalize on the potential and the possibility that the future may now hold, but also recognizing that we need to kind of steel ourselves as well simultaneously to be able to capitalize that and see ourselves through whatever threats or whatever scenarios may unfold.
Yeah, I think that's a great articulation of it, and goes into what I think about constantly.
Yeah, and
I think the best articulation of that is in the Sovereign Individual, which talks about this balance of or imbalance of violence a lot. And we see that very clearly now in Bitcoin, but also with other encryption technology, that once you use strong encryption, you gain the upper hand in terms of defense. It doesn't matter who attacks you. Like, even if China and the US and all the other governments in the world conspire against you, and all their armies won't solve this math problem. Like, if you know what you're doing and you encrypt your stuff properly, then you still have the upper hand. And I think this realization, this shift in the power balance, once you realize that as an individual, I think quite a bit changes. As you said so beautifully, John, there are some things now, and this is a very new phenomenon, that you can really and truly own, like your thoughts, like nobody can take that away from you, or your conviction. And Bitcoin is in that realm, and other things, thanks to strong encryption, are in that realm as well. And I think that's such a profound shift in the way the world works. Most people haven't realized that yet. Of course, many cypherpunks wrote about that in the 70s and 80s. And once, like there were some people that were very, very early with realizing what this entails. And all of this, future talk of the 70s and 80s is happening now before our eyes. Like we see that now. We have people that make use of these technologies and that are able to stand up against the most powerful forces in this world and do so successfully.
Yeah, I love The Sovereign Individual. It's one of my favorite books. People, for some reason, it seems like it's very like polarizing. Like half the people are like, "Ugh, I read 50 pages. It was the worst book. Put it down." But I really took a lot away from that. And I think the dynamics of violence and tracing that through history and technological changes, and that the nature of offense or defense really shapes what sort of civilization emerges from that. And I think that Bitcoin, like, I think we underestimate, even a lot of Bitcoiners underestimate how much defense comes from Bitcoin, because you're not just defending the monetary supply, which is huge for disrupting economic calculation, but you're also defending economic transactions themselves, right? When you can communicate value across borders without any sort of third party, then you're defending your own economic activity. And then so what happens when we have defensible economic activity outside of borders? Then we're opening up so many areas of the world that are in just absolutely corrupt, hellholes, and we can just, suddenly they can just, transact beyond that, and the possibilities for that, and that, just sudden unlocking of vast amounts of human potential is also just something that blows me away. But I guess it's kind of outside the realm of this talk, but it goes in that same theme of defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may add something onto that, as John said before, like there's so many layers to this. And as you said, you have a defense against supply dilution. You have a defense against censoring transactions. You can defend your own stash in your head, or just on your hardware wallet or whatever. There's so many layers to that. And I think the second and third order effects are just profound as well. Like you talked about before with economic calculations. If you actually have a money that isn't broken and you can also defend, for example, against reckless spending for wars, for example, and you can also defend against economic misallocation. Like undoubtedly, as we have also seen in the Belle Epoque on the gold standard, if we are on the Bitcoin standard, having the soundest money that we ever had on Earth, there won't be as much capital misallocation as we are seeing right now in this world. And I think those were like 10 things now that I listed, and all of this is wrapped up in Bitcoin. And most people maybe understand one or two aspects of that, but all of those things are important, and all of it will change the world, in my opinion.
Knut, I think you've been wanting to say something.
Yeah, I've been thinking of how to articulate it, but just to turn things around and to say something positive about the world. And like for us in this room and in this conference, there is a huge opportunity. We should be honest to ourselves about that. Like if Bitcoin takes off, or rather when it takes off, we will all be in the history books. With our names somewhere, and of course that is part of why we're doing what we're doing. We shouldn't lie to ourselves about that. At least a tiny part.
you know what I find funny about that, Knut, and to be honest, maybe subconsciously to your point, but no part of my engagement of this is like I want to be recognized as having been one of the early participants. Now I'm going to enjoy some I told you so's and stuff like that, but in the history,
of course.
But what I mean is like, so, but I think it could be happening subconsciously. But what I do find really interesting, I mean, look at us right now, right? We're all, in different countries, different people, different ages, everything. And I sometimes find it tickles me to be like, why is it us that are here now? It's
but I mean subconsciously.
Sure.
Mine's conscious.
Of course, yeah, but for the most part, subconsciously, we wouldn't be sitting here talking, and we wouldn't write books or like program websites or whatever if we didn't have this strong belief in that this system worked, or like
So let me ask you this:
if it hadn't clicked for us, but there is a subconscious like opportunity somewhere back there.
Sure. Yeah. Let me ask you this: given what you just said, and there may be no uptake on this question, but I just want to put it out there. Has that dynamic that we just described, has that changed your perspective or sense or believe in the idea of fate? The idea of fate.
The idea of faith in what?
In fate, like as in some grander plan for things. Has it changed that at all?
Not at all, because I wouldn't call it fate, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I mean, like when you say that you capitalize on something, that has got a negative ring to it because of Keynesian economics, right? And because of the system we're in. Like, there's nothing negative about wanting to succeed.
Well, I couldn't agree more.
And I think this ties into the skin in the game thing. Like, you have a lot to lose, but you have a lot to win as well. Mm-hmm. And like, we wouldn't be in it if there was nothing in it for us. Like in that case, you can just sit back and hodl, and you can be hodl or not. No offense, Gigi.
Put that mask down, otherwise it gets confusing.
What will the state recognition be?
Yeah,
that's going to be very interesting here.
Yeah, exactly. I have actually something to add to that. In terms of why am I doing what I'm doing? I actually don't know. I can't answer that question. The best answer that pops into my head is because it's just a lot of fun. I'm not sure if I'm doing it for fame. You know, I probably should have used my real name if I was doing it for fame. And I'm definitely not doing it for money. Like the opportunity cost I suffered in the last 4 years or so is huge. Like I could be, you know,
Yeah, but Gigi, if
I
would you say that you do it for excitement?
I don't know. I it gives me meaning. That's what I would say. Of course, it excites me as well. But I have a very peculiar relationship to Bitcoin. Like a weird thing happened to me like a year ago or so, and for me, it just feels like it's the right thing to do and the right thing to spend my time on. Like no matter what, it doesn't. Like if Bitcoin goes to zero, so be it. I'll be useful somewhere else. I mean, I highly doubt it, but I'm not sure if I'm doing it for fame, and I'm definitely not doing it for the money. I mean, of course, as everyone else, I'm in it for the number go up technology as well. And if Bitcoin moons immensely, then I will profit of that as well. Maybe, you know, maybe I'll have just another series of boating accidents. Who knows?
Maybe,
But it's complicated. I'm not sure if many people are really in it for fame and riches. I think this is a second order effect that would be nice, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't think that's not what I'm after, really. Like fame, but rather like to admit to ourselves, because we ought to question ourselves, all of us that are in this, and the process of questioning everything continues. Hopefully, and we shouldn't just sit here and be a circle jerk. Like so. Can we? My point is, can we admit to ourselves that there is excitement in doing what you feel is meaningful and interacting with the people you admire, and like of course there is, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think we've just been our upbringing in the Keynesian thing, like know your place and don't question things, that has skewed our perception of what is how to embrace you know, doing good stuff and getting recognized for it.
Yeah, Knut, I'm
Well, I would
like excited by, you know, the meaning of this thing, and yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I have no disagreement there. I mean, I'm 100% on board with that.
I'm sure every one of you had this moment when you're like realizing how cool this thing is, and you want to drop anything else you're doing and just contribute 24/7 to Bitcoin in any way you want. But lately, I kind of found a way to justify it for me. So I believe that I already live in a full anarchy right now. Like, I don't care what the political situation is, where it is, what they're telling you you can or cannot do. I'm pretty sure I live in the full anarchy. And the way I see it, you pretty much build anarchy for yourself. You don't force things on people. It's fully voluntarily world. And then you just find other nodes that are doing the same, and you just connect those nodes. So, and now telling people about Bitcoin, bringing them to this world, and kind of helping them to build this node to run their own node of anarchy. You just expanding your network. You're connecting to trusted, reliable node that is like running the same world network as you do, like the world without forced relationships and all that stuff. So I think that's why I'm doing it now.
Hey, Katie, that is a very good point, and I would like to echo that again. You build it for yourself. That is the main reason, right? I need that tool. I need to have a censorship-resistant, unconfiscatable asset that nobody can steal from me directly and that nobody can inflate out of my hands by indirect theft. Right? This is why I build Bitcoin weapons, because I need them. And well, if the tools improve in utility when others use them, right, as is the case with the monetary goods that relies on the network effect, or is the case with CoinJoin, for example, that relies on network effect for privacy, then it is in my very best interest to teach others how to run their own node and how to be self-sovereign in this network, because I benefit from it. I mean, that is the ultimate thing. I need this weapon. That's why I build it. And that's why it's so exciting, right? So absolutely, I agree with you too.
Kind of on that point, and taking it back to kind of the behavior change that is inspired by Bitcoin, do any of you feel a sense that you're kind of steward or representatives for this thing, and for everything that it means to you, you want to convey that to other people, and not just in your gentle or hardcore shilling, but the fact that you are an example for the value and meaning and usefulness to be derived from this thing. And as a result, a part of the behavior change is inspired by your wanting to represent it well, so that you don't misrepresent it, so that you're an example of, the value of this thing. Do any of you guys feel that?
This is a trick question, isn't it?
Yeah. I like to think of it this way. You can speak about Bitcoin, but you cannot speak for Bitcoin. Like if you speak for Bitcoin, you're gonna have a bad time. Some people try to do that, and it's just not the best idea. So I see myself like I don't even see myself as a Bitcoin researcher. I'm too unprofessional for that. I see myself as like a Bitcoin explorer. Like I try to explore this weird new organism thingy, and I try to write my thoughts about it in a coherent way. And if I can contribute some code, then that's good as well. But I definitely do not speak for Bitcoin. And I even stopped to advocate for it too much. I went from shilling lightly to almost not shilling at all, because I think that everyone will find Bitcoin and understand Bitcoin once he or she is ready. And after failing for so many years convincing my friends and family that this is important, I wrote a very last letter for all of them, dear friends and dear family. And I will just, whenever they turn around now and ask me about the price or if it's a good time to buy, I'll just send them that, and that will be it. But I do not speak for Bitcoin, not at all.
Sorry. There's a term for such an explorer, and it's a hodlonaut. You're a hodlonaut, Gigi.
But that's kind of what I was referring to. It wasn't a trick question, but what I kind of meant was, instead of the shilling, do you think it's more effective or important to just be an example of the value of this thing and have it expressed through you? And that's the most powerful shilling you could ever do, as in become the person you become as a result of being engaged in this thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree with Dare Gigi a lot. I do not speak for Bitcoin. Obviously, no one does, and I'm not gonna I don't really want to be that guy who always pushes Bitcoin on people. And like you said, everyone finds Bitcoin at a different stage in their life. And I do you pretty much said what I was gonna say, John. I was gonna say, lead by example. Do things for yourself. If being in Bitcoin makes you want to study more, eat better, exercise more, then do it. Show your friends and family that this magic internet money is changing your life for the better. Just lead by example is what I have to say.
Yeah, I do agree with the point you're getting at, John, which is I guess I haven't really thought about it explicitly, but because Bitcoin has given me this newfound purpose, and that I really want to see brought out into the world, and I want to see this future, I would feel bad if I did something that tarnished its reputation by association. I guess I hadn't really thought about this, and I could also see it in some sort of pseudo religious context, right? Where you don't want to make the religion look bad, or you don't want to bring some sort of guilt upon you, or some sin or something like that. I wouldn't want to commit some giant fraud and then have the fact that I was a Bitcoiner be associated with the fraud and make Bitcoin look bad by association, I guess. So I don't think any of it's conscious, but I guess I would, it just reinforces me wanting to be a positive force in the world and carry that torch properly, I guess.
Yeah. All right, let me hit a few specifics here just for shits and giggles. How has Bitcoin, or being involved in Bitcoin, affected your approach to your diet and fitness specifically? Everybody can have a go. You take it away, Knut.
I not in very many ways. I try to eat good food and drink whatever I want whenever I want to. It's an expression of freedom, and my diet is my business. Thank you very much.
Gigi?
I like steak.
Yeah, well, as I said at the very beginning, I lived a very unhealthy lifestyle, and the only thing I always did was I was very active, so I did a lot of sport. I think that's what saved me. But it's definitely not only Bitcoin. It's just getting older as well, and having a child now. I try to take care of myself as best as I can, and I try to be the best version of myself that I can be, and that's what I'm working towards every day.
Nick?
My diet's gotten better since I've gotten into Bitcoin, but also my diet's always been shit. So it's like no matter what healthy stuff I add, it's gonna get better. But it's definitely made me eat better in a sense that I exercised a ton when I was in middle school, high school. I played on a travel soccer team, like a really competitive one, and we were always going away for like states and regionals and stuff. And I had to be super fit for all that. And I feel like it didn't matter too much because I was good back then. And when I stopped playing soccer and I started working and doing more Bitcoin related stuff, I had less time to exercise. And when I started to eat, unhealthy, it made me feel slow, lethargic, and bad overall because I couldn't do the same stuff I used to. So I was like, okay, how do I get back to that state of fitness? So it's like, okay, I need to start eating better. And even if it means I don't exercise as much, and that's really made me feel a lot better.
Connor?
Yeah, I've basically like 180'd my health. I wasn't like unhealthy, but I wasn't like actively trying to be healthy prior to Bitcoin. I just kind of like ate whatever I wanted to. I mean, I guess I tried to eat healthy a little bit, but now I'm like I'm so much more conscious about stuff. I like actively think about my diet. I eat a lot more meat, just great. And I go to the gym all the time. Well, not because of quarantine, but even with quarantine, like I've been working out at home like every day, every other day. And, I just feel constantly motivated. It's awesome.
80?
I believe that I was extremely healthy my whole life. I was a professional athlete, I was in a national team, and I thought that my diet was perfect. But again, once you do your own research, you realize that your like breakfast out meal is not actually healthy. And I discovered a whole new health paradigm, and probably for the first time ever, I can really say that I'm living a very healthy lifestyle.
Max?
For me, that swung like a pendulum from one extreme to the other. I started out just with a regular diet, nothing much. But then, due to ethical concerns, basically a non-aggression principle, I switched to vegetarianism / almost all vegan. And that was out of the same ethical concerns why I'm in Bitcoin. Right? But then I realized that this really was degrading my health quite drastically. And, I'm an individualist first and foremost. So I needed to change something by that. And now I'm pretty much a full carnivore and mainly eating meats and cheeses. And this has increased my health quite drastically. And it's quite insane. I mean, I've lost a lot of muscle mass during the vegetarian days, and without even doing too much, sport effort, it has increased quite drastically. But then every time you do a workout, it's just exponential. So this is quite fun. From the ethical concerns, starting out, to then moving to the full individualistic mindset. Both sides of the pendulum. But right now, I definitely do prefer a good steak.
I just add something here.
Sure.
I think society in general is too focused on diets. And I don't know how it's found its way into Bitcoin as well with this carnivore thing. I mean, I like steak just as much as the next guy, but where's the rock and roll? Where's the I do what I want spirit? Like, why is people so upset about food and what people eat and how much they exercise?
I mean, for me, it's not like caring about other people, but it's just like it goes back to Jocko's idea of discipline equals freedom. Like because I have this like radical understanding of what's going to happen in the world, I want to be very disciplined so I can maximize my freedom in the world, my potential to act upon that, I guess. So, what goes into my body and how I feel, I see as being very important to acting on that. But I don't care if other people, eat all the pizza they want, they can do that. And I'll have the Bitcoin advantage.
I think I can explain very easily the connection between a carnivore diet and
everything. I know this, like, big fun.
No, it's just like Seyfedin even has a course about it with like fiat money, fiat food, sound money, sound food.
But the thing is, like, I have to admit, I live a lot healthier now than I did before as well. And I eat a lot more meat and I exercise every day. And I didn't do that before Bitcoin. But my point is, who cares?
Well, I think my perspective on this is kind of what we were talking about before, and becoming fit for what's to come, the good and the bad. And look, everyone's gonna determine the balance that works for them more. Some people can eat pizza every day and function at a very high level, have a high mood, have a high energy, etc. Other people can't. And so I think everyone's just finding that balance. Like maybe, Knut, the rock and roll lifestyle makes you pumping out a book every year and being super productive and that kind of stuff. But other people, maybe they need to be super strict. Like what Connor said, discipline equals freedom. That's very much work for me, because when I veer off, I become way less productive, and I don't feel as good. My mood isn't as good.
You shouldn't say that publicly. You should be Keith Richards publicly, like, and you should exercise behind closed doors.
Why?
I mean, Keith Richards is probably not at all as unhealthy as people perceive him to be, right?
You mean you just think it's cooler not to care?
So I don't know what I'm onto here. I was sidetracked a long time ago.
All right. So I want to ask this question. We touched on it very briefly earlier. I think, Gigi, you mentioned something about it. But, obviously this whole discussion has been about how we've changed, how change has been either inspired or permitted by interacting with Bitcoin. And I think that's generally framed as a positive. But is it a vulnerability to have, who you are, how you behave, so intertwined and wrapped up with something that is ultimately beyond your control? Do you guys have any thoughts on basically what if we're wrong? What does that mean?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, even if we are right. But I struggle with that sometimes because, as I said, I failed to convince most of my loved ones and most of my friends. So I experience that almost every week, that an attack on Bitcoin feels almost like an attack on my identity, because I'm so wrapped up in it. And if someone talks shit about Bitcoin, I tend to take it personally. And it's really an exercise in self-control, and you have to meditate on that a bit to untangle yourself from Bitcoin from time to time. And that's also the beauty of Bitcoin. Like you can't just go away and it will wait for you. You can disengage and later engage again. And I think it's important to not wed yourself too much with this thing. I mean, living in symbiosis with Bitcoin, I think, is very important. But there's still, most of the world still don't take Bitcoin seriously at all. And that doesn't mean that you're not a serious person or you're not seriously involved in it. And I think it's important to realize that and just step out of your little bubble from time to time and try to talk to real people, and don't take them too seriously if they don't take Bitcoin seriously.
Anybody else?
I'm definitely in a bubble. Like, all my friends are Bitcoiners. I have no normie friends left at this point, pretty much, because, like, I left my life behind. I immigrated to the States, and I gained a whole new group of friends, and I met them all through Bitcoin. But I would say that I discovered myself better through this experience. Like, I was this weird Katie that had weird opinion on stuff, that acted weird, tried to find weird ways. But now, when everybody's weird, I can be as weird as I want to, and I feel very comfortable with that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think regardless of whether it fails or not, I mean, if it fails, all my statements still stand. Like, this was our only shot at sound money. I still believe that if Bitcoin fails, the experiment failed, but that doesn't mean we can't learn anything from it. I mean, the point is what we learn from it, what we can take away from it, right? And that still stands, even if Bitcoin goes to zero.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be like, it goes back to the idea of like what it's given us. Like, for me, it's given me a sense of purpose, a sense of hope for a better future, a sense that there is some sort of path forward out of, this centrally planned mess that we have. And an attack on Bitcoin, or Bitcoin failing in some way, like, that would just be it. It would be nice to silo it from how I feel, but it would just be crushing for me, because I do have a lot of like hope wrapped up in it, and that's kind of inevitable, because that's what gives me the positivity that I experience from Bitcoin. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's the skin of the game, and I think, but at the same time, like, I guess when someone does attack Bitcoin, it never comes from a place of anything other than ignorance. And, well, I don't know. I feel like some no-coiners are just like they intentionally hate Bitcoin for no valid purpose. But for a lot of people, negative comments just come from a place of just repeating whatever tired statements they've heard on CNBC or whatever. Well, CNBC is pretty bullish lately, but other news outlets. Yeah, so for them, it's just like, you just gotta take it as it is. And I feel like, in a way, the stock to flow analysis has actually kind of helped me reach the Zen state where stock to flow determines price and demand, and it's not the demand determines price, it's been a nice little mental barrier for me. So I'm like, I don't even have to show people, look, it's got number go up technology programmed in it. It doesn't even matter at this point. Like, I just have to wait. And that's been a nice, like, breath of relief. So, yeah.
If Bitcoin does fail, I'm going to know a lot of people who want, separation of state and money. So I feel like, yeah, Bitcoin going to zero would be like absolutely soul crushing, but I would still have like even at least a little sliver of like hope and optimism that something, something good could, there's light at the end of the tunnel type of stuff, So I feel like something good would happen.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. Like, I mean, ideally it's Bitcoin, because that's what we've been working towards. But like, I think you're right there that, like, in many ways the genie's out of the bottle. Like, I don't think that for much longer we're going to have state-based currency. I mean, maybe it's like I'm talking like longer time frames, but like I think it's a few generations at most, and I think it's like very soon coming to an end, personally. So even if Bitcoin doesn't succeed, like, the structure of decentralized, permissionless, self-referential database it's here to stay, and there's no way you can put that back.
I don't think so. I don't think you can repeat this. I think this is our only shot at this, because of the initial distribution. So sorry there, Connor, but I think this is our only shot. Otherwise, I would be a shitcoiner.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Knut.
Guys, that was my hope. Come on.
No, but I think we forget another fundamental thing, and that is we say if Bitcoin goes to zero, but that doesn't matter because value is subjective, right? So number on screen can say zero, but that doesn't mean it has to be zero for you. And this is the most important lesson. The number on the screen just represents what someone was able to was willing to buy a Bitcoin for and to sell a Bitcoin for the last time it was bought or sold. It is nothing more than historical data. So it can go to zero, but if you have an ironclad belief in it, it can still be worth $100,000.
But I mean, if there was a break of like ECDSA or something that actually made it so that the like distribution of Bitcoin property or ownership became impossible.
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
I still feel like eventually we have the components together, proof of work and public-private key cryptography, and that there would be a new one. I don't think it would be ideal. It wouldn't be. I think this is our best shot, but I don't think this is our only shot. I think that the new one would be very, very poorly distributed compared to this because it wouldn't have as organic of a beginning. It wouldn't have the same waves of adoption and things. It would be much more top-heavy with early adopters.
How would you achieve decentralization in that case?
Well, I mean, I think it would have to kind of grow similar to Bitcoin did. In the very beginning, it wasn't decentralized. It has achieved decentralization through time and effort. And I think that another shot wouldn't be as good. And Bitcoin was, kind of beautifully. Well, I guess you're right in the sense that the early days is going to be unsafe for the currency.
Yeah, that's my point. History can't repeat itself. Like another coin would never unfold the same way Bitcoin did. It's impossible because people are aware of how Bitcoin unfolded, and that skews the whole market.
So do you think that in those early days of Bitcoin 2.0, it would just be too vulnerable to attack?
Yeah, I think it would be centralized instantly. There's no way to protect against that. What the point where I really started to believe that Bitcoin's decentralization was sufficient or real enough was when the Bcash fork happened and when SegWit 2x was rejected. But before that, I was still not convinced. So and another coin would have to convince me in the same way, and I don't think it will. I'm sorry, but I think this is our only shot, and I think this is one of the greatest misconceptions about this technology. Because and if we don't treat it as our only shot, there's a higher probability that it will fail. We will have to treasure it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think Robert Breedlove wrote the best piece on that with Bitcoin in the number zero, that it is a path-dependent invention. And what I think about it this way, and I kind of share your concern, Connor, a little bit, but also not really, because I think of it this way. Bitcoin for me is a living organism, but the outcome of this living organism, it's like your fingernails, it's not a living thing anymore. Like the data structure it produces, the blockchain itself, it is independent of the organism. Like even if Bitcoin fails catastrophically and the network goes down, like if we have a global EMP, Third World War, there will be some place where the ledger itself survived. And if everything we know about mathematics and physics has to be wrong for ECDSA and SHA-256 to be broken, and what I'm trying to say is, even if Bitcoin dies, we could still have the fair distribution, given that we still have the ledger and people still have their private keys. And I think this will pretty much always be the case. You know what I mean? So even if Bitcoin dies for technical reasons, like the network goes down, you could reboot it and use the fair structure that we have embedded in the ledger to reboot a second network, given the initial distribution. And I agree with Knut that there's just no other way to bootstrap a network in any way. Like now the cat is out of the bag.
I agree with that point that we could always just take the ledger and new system. But to push back on something that although I agree in general, the aspect of decentralization is not a prerequisite for the technology being successful. Right? Decentralization is a means to an end. The end is censorship resistant and the ability, or the unconfiscatability, right? So, for example, if we somehow figure out that we have a Chaumian eCash type digital bearer certificate, blinded signature magic stuff, where the central server can no longer steal, right, or no longer inflate the money supply, then this would arguably be better, right? Centralized systems are much more efficient, and as long as we don't have to trust the central server, as long as it's just a replaceable service provider itself, then I don't think that it would be too bad, right? Of course, we can argue about the nuances, but it still might be a very successful system in that way. So the decentralization is not the end goal that we want to achieve, right? The end goal is the sovereignty.
Yeah, but they go hand in hand, right? Like if you have a centralized server, how would you prevent it from, like, what you're talking about is sort of utopian, because the decentralization is what prevents this from happening. I mean, there is no other way.
So far, that this has certainly been the case, right? But we don't know what smart brains will come up in the future, right? It used to be thought impossible to have a system like Bitcoin, right? To have the scarcity in cyberspace. Now it is possible, right? It's very decentralized. It's very inefficient. Well, learnings that we had, we can go further and build new technologies that might be more centralized, but still have these same properties. You know, one example for would be Scrypt. Scrypt is a federation-based eCash server, basically. So instead of relying on the trust of one central server, you have a federation of 7 out of 10 servers. Right. So this already is a huge step forward from having one central point of failure to having a distributed set of points of failures. It is still centralized in that sense. And there's still a client-server relationship, but at least the stealing and inflation of the server is prevented.
Would you trust that system, Max?
Well, I definitely trust a federation more than a single server. I don't trust it as much as Bitcoin, obviously. I'm not saying that we have the technology. I'm saying there's a possibility for such a technology.
Guys, I'm going to jump in.
Trusting a federation.
This is a good conversation, but beyond the scope of this panel, and we're going to shut it down soon. So I got 2 more for you guys, and then we're going to close it off. The second last one is, what have been some of the negative impacts of engaging with Bitcoin? You know, in your negative influences in your life.
And think of a single one.
Okay, I'll start. So for me, I definitely spent more time on Twitter, and I question the benefit of doing that. So the time used to scroll through Twitter and be involved in conversations and stuff like that, I think my time could probably be more productively spent doing other things, if I'm honest with myself.
Yeah, I mean, we can only gain so much benefit from dunking on Roy Sabag, right? But I mean, I don't know. Twitter is probably definitely the hardest one for me, because I've made so many friends on there, and I've gained so many relationships that I really think are going to last a very, very long time. So, I mean, I think that it's one of those things, like, you can obviously always overdo it, but I think the benefits of social networking have just been astronomical, and I don't even think we're seeing the returns yet, honestly. So. Yeah, it's a mixed bag there. I think that's probably the hardest one for me too, is I am on my phone more than I probably should be. And, there are loved ones I want to spend time with. So
one negative for me that could be seen as a positive is, like, I don't go out and, like, do more social stuff as much as I used to, because it's like, oh my God, do I want to go to this party and get blacked out drunk, or do I want to, like, spend my Friday night doing Bitcoin stuff and, like, getting online and talking with other Bitcoiners and expanding my knowledge. And it's just like, sometimes you really just don't want to, like, interact with, like, normies, because you're like, I just want to do Bitcoin stuff. Like, I don't want to spend my time doing anything else. So it's like, as long as you don't let it ruin, like, relationships, because, like, don't think of yourself as, like, oh, you're not in Bitcoin, well, that places me above you. It's like, don't I've seen some people start to think like that, and as long as you don't let it like ruin your ego, I think you're good.
Yes, that's a very good point, Nick. And I think in general, it's a realignment of priorities, right? And that can be, of course, a good thing if the priorities were wrong placed in the first instance. But still, there are many valuable things or relationships that are no longer as valuable or prioritized as working on Bitcoin stuff. So this might be an old group of friends that are still good guys and everything, but like for example with who said yeah, with Gigi, like all the skaters, right? Great guys, nothing wrong with them, but spending your time in Bitcoin is more valuable to you. So they unfortunately get kicked out on the wayside.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm having a hard time answering this question because it depends on your point of view. As far as I'm concerned, I went all in into Bitcoin a couple of times. Like, I went all in financially. I went all in by quitting my job. I went all in by moving somewhere else and just concentrating my whole time on Bitcoin. I dropped all my other hobbies and all my other interests. I pretty much dropped all my other friends as well. I just had to concentrate on the thing solely. Many people would say that's a negative thing. I obviously don't agree, since I choose to spend my time on Bitcoin. And I still have very good friends from the olden days that know that I'm into Bitcoin, and they still talk to me. So not everything is lost, but I don't know. It's a mixed bag for sure. It's Bitcoin is a little bit like Bitcoin Twitter as well. Like it's very hard to disengage, and I learned that the hard way last year, that I need to also do some other things. And if anyone else listening to this has the same problem, I can highly recommend starting a family, because that's a nice forcing function. Like a baby is a very nice forcing function of doing something else and getting off Bitcoin Twitter for a change.
Knut?
Nothing. Yeah, as usual, the opposite is true for me. Like Bitcoin Twitter is a good excuse to get rid of the kids.
Yeah, I feel very similarly to Nick. It's definitely no aspect. You want to be careful. Towards the people that are in your social life that are not to. I just feel like, if a couple of the boys want me to go down to a bar and have a few beers around a table, I'm just like, we're going to be talking about nonsense. Like I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to smash ideas together and see what new ones emerge. I want to build. There's so little time and so much to do, sort of attitude, and wasting it with the nonsense, especially in light of certain areas of the world where, I know I'm generalizing horribly here, but to encounter a lot of kind of ideological possession where people don't seem to be thinking, necessarily for themselves. And you hear a lot of the same opinions in social environments and stuff like that. So I find that my social life and my social circle has shrunken dramatically, but not in a way that I've, just like kick people to the side and now I'm a different person to them. It's just that I see them less because in my free time I'd like to spend it growing and building and developing.
Yeah, but that's not really Bitcoin's fault now, is it? That's not because of Bitcoin being too interesting, that they are being too uninteresting, right?
Well, I think the relative difference is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it does change how you see them. I mean, it's like you're watching like black and white television, and then it's like in full color, and it's really hard to go back to it or something. It's just like there is a dimension of it that is missing when you go back and have the conversations you used to have.
Exactly.
And it's kind of sad. I don't get enjoyment out of the same things that I used to, because I don't feel like it's really hard for me to sit down and play video games for 4 hours. I used to love it. Now I'm like, I can do this for a few hours while I'm listening to a podcast on finance or something. Like I need some sort of stimulation to feel like I'm growing in some way. It's like I feel like Bitcoin is like, it's shown me how small my brain was in terms of like how much I know. Like it really like just punched me in the face and told me that I don't know anything about anything. And now it is so hard to go back to doing things that are largely just entertainment with that sense just like kind of gnawing at me in the background. And I feel this urge to constantly explore. And it's like a great thing, but you know, it does have drawbacks in the sense like it's hard for me to sit down and like watch a movie or something. I don't know. And so you have to think about the trade-offs, and I don't know, a lot of times you have to think, well, this is more than just a movie. It's the experience of doing it with people I care about, and that's good, you know, for XYZ reason. But I don't know. It's been weird.
Totally relate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's if it's one negative, it's that it like hinders your brain from ever slowing down.
Yeah.
I mean, meditation helps. I try to when I exercise, which I said I didn't before, but anyway, when I run a couple of miles every day, and I like or a couple of kilometers at least, but I try to do that without my phones and without even my glasses on, no headphones or nothing. Just try to use that for meditation, because I can't even sit down anymore and do nothing. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin has a huge part of that. Of course, it's social media as well, but
I have to remind myself of that too. You know, in my conversation with Bitcoin Sign Guy, he said, Bitcoin can't be an end. It has to be a means. And sometimes I have to remind myself that, you know, this is all for the ability to have a better, richer, more joyful life. And so not to forget that on the way there to actually, you know, stop and smell the roses or actually enjoy life, because this is a tool to do that in a more free way, and not to be forgotten on the journey. All right, last question, guys, and then I'll let you all go. At the beginning of this podcast or panel, I asked you to describe yourself before. I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts regarding the person you may be at this exact time, 4 years from now, on the eve of the next halving. Do you have any visions, aspirations about who you may be or what you may be doing at that time? Knut, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I just had a picture of Conan the Barbarian in my
just ripped
and in my citadel, like eating steak and stuff.
I love it. That was mine too.
He-Man, like next level He-Man stuff.
I love it.
Yeah, if that's an appropriate pronoun these days, I don't know.
I mean, I feel like these next 4 years, it's an awesome question, but a really hard one. I feel like the next 4 years is really, I can't help but see it as like, this is the do or die moment, really. Like with all the things that are happening with COVID, and then the knock-on effects of that with an already extremely fragile monetary system, and we're going into a halving, like I can't imagine what 4 years from now we're going to be like, but it'll be in many ways someone who right now I feel a sense of not anxiety, but restlessness or waiting to see how this unfolds. And I feel like, or at least I hope, that 4 years from now, there'll be a sense of resolution to that. And, you know, we'll just see where the pieces have fallen. And, you know, I think I know where they're going to fall, but, you know, we'll see. And I feel like whoever I am 4 years from now, it'll be someone who is more at peace with things, hopefully. And, yeah, that's kind of all I can think of.
Gigi, Nick?
Gigi can go first if he wants.
Yeah, I'm still trying to think of a good answer. I don't know what will happen in the next 4 years. I hope to have published another book. I also hope to have contributed as much code as I can. I hope to be a good father, and I hope to still care and not lose interest. Like there are many things that I truly deeply care about, and I hope that many other people will start to care as well. And I hope that my motivation will not fade in the next couple of years. I'm not afraid of that, but I hope that in terms of motivation and willingness to work on this thing, that it stays the same. If it goes any higher, I might die. So I hope it stays the same.
I know what you'll be doing, Gigi. You'll tell your kid to shut up while dad's on Bitcoin Twitter.
yeah, exactly. Posting memes.
For me, it's hard to imagine what the next 4 years are going to be like at the end of it, because I'm 20. So when I'm 24, like I feel like that's 20-year-olds and 24-year-olds. Well, I'm almost 21, so let's just say 20 to 25. I feel like that's a huge age gap, and like where you are at 25, you're in a completely different place than you are at 20. So I don't know what I'll be like then. I hope obviously a better version of what I am right now, but kind of like what Gigi said, I really would be disappointed if like my work ethic and drive slows down, and like I want to like continue contributing to the space, but I want to contribute like stuff of better quality, because I definitely think I can step up my game in a lot of ways. And there are some projects I want to get started on, and like some things I have like envisioned, but that's all up to me to really, put my head down and start working. And back to like what Katie was saying earlier, how like once you get into Bitcoin, like you don't really want to do anything else. Like earlier last semester, I was up at like 1 a.m. writing a history paper, and I'm just like, I kind of like backed away from the computer, and I was like, I don't want to be doing this. I want to be, doing Bitcoin stuff. It makes me think, like I've stayed up till 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Happily doing Bitcoin stuff, but when it's something for like school where I don't want to work on it, it's like such a chore and such a pain to do. And it's just, I really want that feeling of like happiness that I get from Bitcoin to continue to, be there when I'm 24, 25.
Nice. Max, are you still around? I think he dropped out for a sec. I'll give my answer and see if Max comes back in the next minute or so. But for me, Connor, the anxiety about the future thing has always been not like crippling for me, but I think it's something we all contend with because we live in an uncertain world. And it dawned on me a few years ago, because I was always concerned about what my future is going to be, what I'm going to have, what I'm going to do, where I'm going to be, all this kind of stuff. And that's, there's a place for all of that. But I realized that the most important aspects of who I was, am I an honest person, a genuine person, kind, like that, all those things, none of those are going to change if I can establish what they are, and if I'm happy with what they are now and I can establish them now. And so I thought, like, well, then in the future, just the peripheral stuff will be different. What I have may be different. The people around me may be different, but like those kind of core elements of who I am are always going to be there. And that gave me some sense of comfort about what the future may hold and what my place in it may be. But as far as, kind of in the Bitcoin question of like, where do you think you'll be as a result of engaging with Bitcoin 4 years from now? For me, the general answer is just, I just want to press into freedom, like freedom to express, freedom to build, freedom to learn, freedom to, that's, in my opinion, that's what this is all about, however you interpret that. And so I think we come from this we're conditioned, and we grow up in such a kind of caged sense of ourself and what's possible and who and what we can do and be. And it's a process of, breaking free from those shackles and exploring different elements of yourself and how those expressions look. And of course, establishing the means to actually express them freely, because obviously we know some of our freedoms are very oppressed, either, consciously or subconsciously. But yeah, for me, that's it. It's just press into freedom in every domain and see what the result is.
Yeah. Never lose those core qualities, John. You definitely have them.
So do you
wise.
guys. So do you guys. All right. I guess it looks like Max is not going to come back. So, guys, I just want to thank you for taking the time to do this. I knew this was going to be super fun. I'm a huge fan of all of you. I consider it an honor that I got to, sit down for one-on-ones with all of you guys, and I'm sure there'll be many more in the future. So, love you guys. Keep doing what you're doing. And if you have any closing thoughts, now's the time.
Yeah, good to see Gigi and John and Max again, and good to see Connor and Nick and talk to them for the first time. Love you guys, love all your work, and keep on doing what you're all doing, and do more of it, please. Love it all.
Max, are you there?
Honor to be part of it.
Max?
Back. The internet connection is tremendously good here.
Did you hear the last question?
Yes, I did. So what to do over the next happening, and what's the vision here? For
Yeah.
me, in one word, it would be to be summed up for being unfuckwithable. So to have all the tools and weapons that I need to defend my property and my livelihood and my loved ones. So this means residing in several citadels. Who cares about one citadel now? We need several of them spread in different regions. Some in the mountains, some on the beachside, maybe one underground in the city. Let's see. Of course, having an armada of drones flying around me to protect myself, and to have good surveillance for any cronies coming to steal my stuff. And of course, the most elaborate taproot scheme to protect my Bitcoin hodlings in almost every case. So basically, all of that together, and it's hopefully going to be glorious.
You win, Max. That was the best response. All right, guys. Well, look, thank you again, and look forward to the next time we all get to chat. And let's go enjoy some of the other speakers in the conference, and most importantly, enjoy the halving. It's going to be fun tonight.
18 blocks, guys. 18 blocks.
Damn, I got to get my pizza and beer ready.
17 now. 17.
Peace out, guys. It was great talking to you all.
See you guys.
See you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Thanks for having me again, John.
Oh, thanks for coming, man. Really appreciate it. Your input was great.
Nice talking to both you two for the first time. I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name?
Knut.
Knut? Okay.
Knut. Yeah. So cool that you're in this at that age. I'm still jaw dropped that you accomplished so much already.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. All right, boys. I'm gonna leave the chat, so I'm sure I'll be speaking to you both soon.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna leave as well.
See you guys.
Yeah. Peace.